Seek the Self. Susunaga Weeraperuma. Ramana Maharshi, 1879-1950, is rightly regarded as one of the greatest saints and profoundest religious philosophers of our time. His exemplary life is a constant source of inspiration not only to those wishing to lead their lives in a righteous manner, but also to persons who are keen on discovering the self, which may be described as that changeless divinity which inherently resides in one and all. It is indeed possible to climb the very summit of the mountain of spirituality with the guidance and assistance of a liberated soul. There is overwhelming evidence to prove that Ramana was directly responsible for the liberation of several blessed devotees who were thereby extricated from their painful cycle of births and deaths. Ramana was never an itinerant preacher, but from the far corners of the globe, devotees flocked to see and hear him. It was mostly by silence that Ramana taught his numerous visitors. Often, he non-verbally communicated his answers to questions. When he spoke, his lucid explanations were to point, brief and sometimes aphoristic. People asked Ramana many questions with subjects as diverse as God and black magic. Regardless of whether these questioners were serious or superficial, he tried to kindle in them an eagerness to seek the self. Always concerned about the quest for the Supreme, he would directly or indirectly indicate that the only question worth asking is, "Who am I?" One should address oneself to it. We must also meditate on maxims such as, "I am not this body," and "I am the self." By assiduously practicing these sadhanas, one manages to dissolve the restrictive self and its attendant problems and thereby discover the eternal self. One is the self and nothing but the self. All else is fiction. The following excerpt from Ramana's booklet entitled "Who Am I?" describes the method of finding the self. Of all the thoughts that arise in the mind, the I thought is the first. It is only after the rise of this that the other thoughts arise. The thought, "Who am I?" will destroy all other thoughts, and like the stick used for stirring the burning pyre, it will itself in the end get destroyed. Then there will arise self-realization. When other thoughts arise, one should not pursue them, but should inquire, to whom did they arise? It does not matter how many thoughts arise. As each thought arises, one should inquire with diligence, to whom has this thought arisen? The answer that would emerge would be, to me. Thereupon, if one inquires, "Who am I?" the mind will go back to its source and the thought that arose will become quiescent. With repeated practice in this manner, the mind will develop the skill to stay in its source. Someone posed an interesting question. It is stated in the scriptures that the self will reveal itself only to one whom it chooses. Then, what is the use of our effort? Ramana replied, "The self will draw unto itself an aspirant only when he becomes introverted. So long as he is extroverted, self-realization is impossible." Many people try to define the self instead of attempting to know the self and abide in it. Bhagavan Sri Ramana, a pictorial biography, page 77. For all his much wanted technological progress, modern man has not managed to find a lasting solution to his inner malice. Any person who takes the trouble to travel across different countries will invariably notice that people are unhappy everywhere. Seldom, if ever, does one meet an individual who can truthfully say, "I am absolutely happy." The principal cause of man's unhappiness is his irrational attachment to the material things. We overlook the fact that all material possessions are by their very nature subject to change, decay, and destruction. We have invested a lot of faith in perishable objects. Why have our possessions become so precious to us? Is it not because our minds have foolishly attached to them an importance that they inherently lack? Our minds, for instance, mistakenly attribute a great value to a diamond, whereas in actuality, a diamond, even a rare and polished one, is nothing more than a mere stone. The popularity of materialism in our day and the corresponding decline in respect for other worldly concerns can be partly traced to the doctrines of Marx, Engels, and Lenin, who believe in a dialectical materialism. With their aesthetic contempt for spirituality, they liked to scoff at religion. Let us consider the simple life of Ramana. Apart from a few personal effects like his loincloth and walking stick, which interestingly enough was an article that he himself had painstakingly carved out of wood, did Ramana really possess anything else? He managed to survive on the offerings of the food from various devotees. He was the poorest of the poor. Yet, Ramana was the happiest of men. He had neither worries nor personal problems, and he enjoyed the blissful state of deep sleep. Why was he such an exceptional individual? Was it not because he was totally immersed in the divine? Therefore, mundane matters never troubled his inner being. There is a saying of Ramana that deserves to be pondered over by all. Divestment of possessions is the highest happiness. Talks with Ramana Maharshi, 6th edition, page 187. On account of the fact that our lives are devoid of a spiritual foundation, we tend to overrate our material possessions, forgetting that these, like the toys of children, should be seen as things of nothing more than temporary interest. In the stormy sea of life, why hang on to ephemeral things when the only reliable refuge from sorrow is the deathless self? All the great religions of the world have unanimously frowned on man's fondness for possessions. Their underlying message is that the renunciation of possessions qualifies one for self-realization. This theme is like a golden thread that runs through all the sacred scriptures. There is the oft-quoted saying of Jesus that it is easier for a camel to go through the eyes of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Matthew 19:24. Even more interesting is this excerpt, Matthew 6:26-33 from Christ. Behold, the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? Which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit unto his stature? And why take ye through for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. The gist of these biblical lines can be expressed in one simple sentence: abide in the self, that is God, and all your material needs will be automatically provided for you. Ramana not only advocated these teachings but also practiced them. He was the very apotheosis of Christianity. The word surrender simply means yielding oneself to the superior power or authority of another. Surrender also implies the rejection of all resistance to the operation of that power. When one gives up struggling, what inevitably follows is a state of submission. Sometimes, during the course of war, when a group of soldiers sense that defeat is imminent, without a word of protest, they lay down their arms and willingly surrender themselves to the more powerful victorious army. They are only too pleased to end the fighting. They have a white flag or raise their arms upwards in a gesture of peace. They do not mind surrendering and becoming prisoners of war. There is usually in this kind of surrender the absence of any element of coercion, for none has forced them to do so. Genuine surrender takes place only when a soldier has cast aside all hatred for his enemies. Former foes becomes his future friends. A soldier who is puffed up with pride and hence lacking humility will shudder at the thought of surrendering. We are all soldiers in the battlefield of life. Should we allow our narrow, ego-centered minds to direct the course of our lives, or should the immeasurably more powerful life force be allowed to direct us? Are we going to be guided by the self or the self? He who has surrendered to himself is in a position to regard all the vicissitudes of life with equanimity. As every event in life is divinely ordained, why be elated during good times? By the same token, why complain or become depressed when there are bad times? Instead of resigning ourselves to our fate, we vainly try to change that which is not within our power to change. What we regard as misfortunes, these unbeknown to us turn out to be blessings in disguise. Why try to swim against the current of life? By surrendering fully to the mysterious workings of the preordained cosmic plan, one learns to accept whatever happens to oneself, come what may, secure in the knowledge that everything emanates from the divine. When a pious Christian zealously recites the Lord's Prayer, one wonders whether he is always cognizant of the great significance of the following noteworthy words: Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Matthew 6:10. Through prayer, he is invoking the overpowering influence of thy will, the Lord's will, in contradistinction to his own restrictive, private, and selfish will. For the Lord alone has become his spiritual beacon. Can the divine will govern his life unless he discards his own personal will? If he is prepared to do that, the divine becomes the source of inspiration for all his thoughts, words, and deeds. Thus he finds fulfillment in life by surrendering himself to the will of the Almighty. All theistic religions have emphasized the importance of surrendering to the invincible and invisible power. Prayer is one of the most popular methods of surrendering oneself to the Most High. A Muslim is expected to bow downwards and kneel subserviently and pray 5 times every day. Praying should never become a mere mechanical ritual. The sole aim of prayer should be the total annihilation of the ego so that the mind gets automatically merged in the spiritual heart which is within oneself. Instead of probing and plunging inwards, why do so many uselessly direct their efforts outwards? Is God external to ourselves? One is reminded of the amusing Zen story of a monk who was searching for his ox in the fields while forgetting that he was actually riding on it. When Dr. Syed wanted to know the steps by which he could achieve surrender, Ramana said, "There are 2 ways. One is looking into the source of I and merging into that source. The other is feeling I am helpless by myself. God alone is all powerful, and except throwing myself completely on Him, there is no other means of safety for me," and thus gradually developing the conviction that God alone exists and the ego does not count. Both methods lead to the same goal. Complete surrender is another name for jnana or liberation. Day by Day with Bhagavan by A. Devaraja Mudaliyar, page 176. The first method is clearly explained in Ramana's helpful booklet entitled Who Am I? The second prescribed method involves the progressive strengthening of the realization that one is unable to help oneself and powerless, whereas God is omnipotent. In a strikingly beautiful passage, Ramana has explained that surrender is no other than the state of pure devotion, which is called bhakti. Surrender to Him and abide by His will, whether He appears or vanishes. Await His pleasure. If you ask Him to do as you please, it is not surrender but command to Him. You cannot have Him obey you and yet think that you have surrendered. He knows what is best and when and how to do it. Leave everything entirely to Him. He is the burden. You have no longer any cares. All your cares are His. Such is surrender. This is bhakti. Talks, page 425. Praying is also an exercise in humility. A person with a puffed up ego cannot bring himself either to pray or beg. Praying is in essence a sort of begging or supplication. We frown on beggars. Actually, we can learn a lot from beggars, for they at least have temporarily humbled themselves. There is a saying that it is more difficult to receive than to give. It is psychologically more of a struggle to be a receiver of alms than to be a giver, because not infrequently there is a touch of patronizing arrogance in the minds of those who are charitable. Through the power of prayer, these fortifications of the ego, such as pride and self-importance, can be eroded. Thus, prayer opens the door to self-realization. It is best if our prayers are not angry petitions to God, but long and friendly conversations with Him. A prayer can take the form of a private chat in the innermost recesses of the mind, during which one can be bare at heart. It is an opportunity to talk over with God your worries, difficulties, and problems, telling Him everything and withholding nothing. In that atmosphere of complete frankness, there is a great unburdening of the unconscious and the restoration of one's peace of mind. Only with such openness and honesty will it become possible to establish a direct link with God. Auguste Sabatier, a liberal French theologian, has stated that religion is an intercourse, a conscious and voluntary relation entered into by a soul in distress with a mysterious power upon which it feels itself to depend and upon which its fate is contingent. This intercourse with God is realized by prayer. Prayer is religion in act, that is, prayer is a real religion. It is prayer that distinguishes the religious phenomena from such similar or neighboring phenomena as purely moral or aesthetic sentiment. Religion is nothing if it be not the vital act by which the entire mind seeks to save itself by clinging to the principle from which it draws its life. This act is prayer, by which term I understand no vain exercise of words, no mere repetition of certain sacred formulae, but the very movement itself of the soul, putting itself in a personal relation of contact with the mysterious power of which it feels the presence. It may be even before it has a name by which to call it. Wherever this interior prayer is lacking, there is no religion. Wherever, on the other hand, this prayer rises and stirs the soul, even in the absence of forms or of doctrines, we have living religion. The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, page 464. Bhagavan Ramana's views on this all-important subject are worthy of consideration. Khanna, is there destiny? And if what is destined to happen will happen, is there any use in prayer or effort, or should we just remain idle? Bhagavan Ramana, there are only two ways to conquer destiny or be independent of it. One is to inquire for whom is this destiny and discover that only the ego is bound by destiny and not the self, and that the ego is non-existent. The other way to kill the ego by completely surrendering to the Lord, by realizing one's helplessness and saying all the time, "Not I, but Thou, O Lord," and giving up all sense of I and mine and leaving it to the Lord to do what He likes with you. Surrender can never be regarded as complete so long as the devotee wants this or that from the Lord. True surrender is love of God for the sake of love and nothing else, not even for the sake of salvation. In other words, complete effacement of the ego is necessary to conquer destiny, whether you achieve this effacement through self-inquiry or through Bhakti Marga. Khanna, are our prayers granted? Bhagavan Ramana, yes, they are granted. No thought will go in vain. Every thought will produce its effect sometime or the other. Thought force will never go in vain. Day by Day with Bhagavan, page 288. The message of the above mentioned passage may come as a bit of a shock to many. In the past, have our declarations of love for God been unblemished? By using sweet devotional words, have we not tried to cajole the Almighty into doing things for us? Did we not have ulterior motives for singing His praises? Our prayers have been tainted by the desire to receive various benefits, including that of spiritual liberation. With impure hearts, we sought after God, who is immeasurably great. He surely deserves to be adored for His own sake. It has been estimated that there are 84 yogic bodily postures or asanas. However, only a few of these are chosen for meditation. One can select those postures in which it is possible to remain strainlessly for the longest time. It was Patanjali's view that an asana should be sthirasukham, firm and comfortable. Bhagavan Ramana was asked, "Which posture is the best?" He replied, "Any asana, possibly Sukhasana, easy posture, or the half Buddha position. But that is immaterial for jnana, the path of knowledge. There was a related question. Does Maharshi advise any physical posture for the Europeans? He answered, it may be advisable. However, it must be clearly understood that meditation is not prohibited in the absence of asanas or prescribed times or any accessories of the kind. Talks, page 10 and 11. Bhagavan Ramana did not categorically state the spiritual progress takes place only in those persons who are prepared to practice certain asanas with all the patience and discipline that these exercises entail. On the other hand, he did not declare that these practices are without value. It is noteworthy that he did not give too much importance to asanas. He has treated that subject in a somewhat casual manner, as if to tell us that he would rather be concerning ourselves with more serious questions. Ramana did not condemn Hatha Yoga. While approving the practice of asanas, he has nevertheless indicated that they are not indispensable because meditation is not prohibited in the absence of asanas. What are the implications of Bhagavan Ramana's statements? One may reasonably infer that, first, although one may practice asanas and meditate at the same time, these are actually two unrelated activities in the sense that they do not necessarily have to be done together. Second, one may meditate at any time of the day or night. Meditation can also be done wherever one happens to be, in a quiet shrine room or a crowded railway compartment. The practice of meditation cannot be restricted to any particular time or place. One can meditate whilst passively lying on a sandy beach or when walking hurriedly along a busy street. Similarly, meditation is possible when having a shower or when mowing the lawn. Any time is meditation time. Third, meditation is compatible with physical activity and movement. This point is worth mentioning because some Zen teachers insist on the absolute motionlessness of the body as a condition that has to be fulfilled before meditation commences. Probably, this requirement originates from their mistaken belief that the stillness of the body is a necessary prelude to the stillness of the mind. Accomplished yogis who are merged in the self have the capacity to remain in a state of blissful inner meditation while doing work, which may involve the rigorous exertion of their muscles. Bhagavan Ramana regarded all animals as his companions. Never referring to an animal as it, he respectfully called them by their names as though they were human beings. Like St. Francis of Assisi, who was attuned to all God's creatures, he had a good rapport with animals. Ramana was fond of animals and they in turn were fond of him. He fed and caressed them. The exquisitely carved statue of the cow Lakshmi at Ramanashramam is a constant reminder that animals must not only be treated gently, but also that they, like ourselves, are potentially capable of self-realization. Lakshmi was a case in point. She was a self-realized being, and every Friday pujas are performed in front of the statue. Narasimha Swami observed that Ramana treats all animals as fellow ascetics who have come to work out their karma in his proximity. He talks to them and gives them a few simple directions which they mostly understand and obey. Self-realization, page 163. Like a long extinct volcano of gigantic proportions on a flat field, the Arunachala mountain dominates the vast arid landscape of Tiruvannamalai. Its Shilhout is particularly striking at dawn and dusk. The word Arunachala has several meanings. Etymologically, it means the steady light. Aruna meaning light, Achala meaning steady, firm, unwavering. Let us examine the word Aruna as explained by Ramana in verse number 2 in 5 hymns to Arunachala. Meaning Sat, which means being. Ru meaning Chit, which means consciousness. Na meaning Ananda, which means bliss. Therefore, Aruna stands for being, consciousness, bliss. Achala signifies perfection. This ancient mountain was so much part and parcel of the life of Ramana. No visit to Ramanashramam would be complete without at least admiring the mysterious beauty of Arunachala. One can, of course, climb and reach its summit by walking along the stony footpaths. The color of Arunachala cannot correctly be described. It is a rusty, earth-brown sienna with hues of rosy pink. Craggy old rocks of different shapes and sizes lie scattered on the precipitous slopes. Its present stark appearance is probably the result of thousands of years of soil erosion. The Virupaksha cave is very small and fascinating. Ramana lived there for about 16 years, from 1900 to 1916. Evidently, he did not suffer from claustrophobia. In the extraordinary quietness of this cave, Ramana composed some of his major works. Celebrities like Ganapati Muni and F.H. Humphreys used to visit Ramana there. This particular abode of Ramana was named after Saint Virupaksha, who had lived on Arunachala about 300 to 400 years ago. It is said that when Weeraperuma was about to pass away, he requested his devotees to leave him alone in this cave. When they returned the next morning, they only found Vibhuti, the holy ash, in the form of his body. It is believed that that was the only way whereby the saint could have remained on Arunachala, since none is permitted to be buried on this sacred mountain, which is reverentially worshipped as a Sivalingam. Inside the cave, Ramana, with his own hands, built a pedestal on which he formed a lingam with the vibhuti of Saint Virupaksha. Some find it difficult to understand the religious significance of vibhuti, the holy ash. Vibhuti represents the ultimate in the sense that ash cannot be reduced to anything else. A corpse that is cremated becomes a lump of ash. Viewed in another way, vibhuti is symbolic of the perishability of the human body, which is in contradistinction to the imperishability of the self. Probably the most enduring spot in the whole ashram is the meditation hall. In a corner of this rectangular room, one can see the very couch that Ramana used. This piece of furniture and his photograph that is placed on it are the cynosure of all eyes. Near this couch is a small hanging oil lamp. It is subtly symbolic of the steady light. All visitors are expected to remain quiet here. A strange stillness pervades the entire room. Although Bhagavan Ramana's physical body can no longer be seen in the meditation hall, one can actually feel there his living invisible presence. Om Shri Ramanarpanamastu.